a chart of the monetary base, of the U.S. monetary base from 1985 to 2010. And the shaded area, can you guys see the shaded areas back there? That's recessions. So you might expect a little bit of a spike during those times because the Federal Reserve has a tendency to want to increase the money supply during recessions. But as you can see, from 1985 all the way till 2010, it's a very steady growth. Okay, this is a very predictable couple percent a year growth of the monetary base. There's only one little blurb in there, the year 2000. That was following the tech bubble burst, and they figured they needed to settle the markets a little bit, so they tried to increase the monetary base for a short time.
Chard,
Yeah, go ahead.
The term monetary base is a bit of jargon.
Yeah, would you please switch to the next slide?
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, that's a great question. Thank you. The monetary base, now this is from 2005. The blue bar just represents, hey, this is what our total base was, $800 billion about in the year 2005. It's pretty much made up of three parts. Coins, which is only $35 billion of the monetary base. Okay, very small percentage is coins. Federal Reserve notes at that time was a major component of the monetary base. And a very small component at that time was the deposits that the banks make at the Federal Reserve. And just so you guys understand that, when the banks keep excess reserves on hand, or like when the Federal Reserve buys bonds from the Goldman Sachs, like the video said, when they buy bonds, that money ends up as a deposit at the Fed for those banks, right? Well, in the past years, it's been a very small number, okay? Because what's the purpose of banks? What is their main objective?
Make money.
Make money, right? The only way you make money, if you're a bank, is if you take the deposits at your bank and you loan those to either consumers, businesses, or you put them into treasuries, right? Or other legal investments that they're allowed to make. But that's what they do, is they keep very little money on hand. They want to be maximized on their reserves. They don't want to have any money just sitting around idle, because idle money doesn't make any profit for them, right? And what you've seen for, if you want to go back for a second, and we'll get more into that, but what you saw from this period all the way up till 2010 is that number for the monetary base was just slowly climbing, and the number of excess reserves at banks was constant. Like, it never changed during all of this. It was always about $25 billion, because banks want to loan money. Okay, that's the essence of a bank, right? And keep that in mind, because we will get back to it, and that's a really great question for people that weren't following. This is at 2005 level here, the red line. Okay, our monetary base was at about $800 billion. Okay, but since the recession began, and you look back here at about 2008, we started really pumping money in 2009, we've had a 200% increase in the monetary base. That's a big deal. And a lot of people don't think it's that big of a deal, but we've gone from $800 billion to $2.4 trillion. And now I just saw on the numbers Jeremiah had up there earlier on that website, it has the monetary base at $2.7 trillion now, not just 2.4. So we've continued to throw additional monies into the money supply. And the reason it's a big deal is, number one, this is unprecedented, right? This is a huge increase in the monetary base. If you could, Jeremiah, would you go to the next slide and then past it? Look at the excess reserves here. Since 1960, they've been virtually zero, about $25 billion, right? Now, you would expect during recessions, okay, would you expect them to hold more or less money during a recession, do you guys think? Why more? That's correct.
Well, because people can't afford to borrow and spend.
Yeah, because there's a chance that consumers and businesses might not be able to pay back the loans, right? So there is an inherent risk with lending money. Banks take risk every time that they lend money. But during a recession, that risk does escalate. But a lot of times, the excess reserves, their extra money in the bank, doesn't go up. What do they buy instead of giving loans?
U.S. Treasury.
U.S. Treasury, right? That's a safe investment, because the government will always just print more to pay you back if they're going to default, right? So that's their safe investment. That basically just keeps you a little bit ahead of inflation, right? But they'll do that in the worst circumstances. And as you can see, for 50 years, all we did was loan out everything that we had, the banks, right? They lent everything. But look what's happened now. would you look at this number? We've gone from literally almost zero to excess reserves of $1.2 trillion. Now, why in the world are we printing all this money and buying all these treasury bonds? Because basically what the Fed's doing is it's going to Jeremiah, let's say Goldman Sachs here, and it's saying, I want your paper bonds, give them to me. Here's a whole bunch of money so you can loan it out. And I'm going to take your paper, and now you've actually got money that you can inject into the system. Okay, you can make loans to businesses, you can make loans to consumers, and they're not doing it, and you can see that right here. These are excess reserve. This is money that's idle. It's not in anything. Now they're using some of the money in investing it, right? Absolutely. But with this money, this is money that's literally just sitting there, right? Doing absolutely nothing. So you may wonder, if we add money to this system, shouldn't we have rising prices? Shouldn't we have inflation?
But it's not out. It's not out in the.
There you go. It's not out in the system yet. It's just sitting in a bank vault. So honestly, we should fear rising prices. Okay, we should be ready for that. And you can already see them, like the video said. I mean, food prices are a lot higher. You know, my wife and I, we only buy meat whatever one's on sale now. We don't have the luxury of buying whichever meat we want. We go to Meijer and whatever one's on sale that week, we buy 3 or 4 packs of it, right? That's what we eat. Prices are going up. And we could talk more about it. I will interject that oil prices are not really just inflation though, right? That has a lot to do with inflation in another way. We've been just destroying our currency, right? The dollar's value is falling, and when the dollar buys less euros and less yuan and less pesos and every other currency, when we can buy less of other currencies, particularly Arabic currency, right, where we're buying the oil from, that makes oil more expensive for us, right? Don't blame greedy oil companies. Don't blame Arab nations that are trying to screw us over. Blame your government for destroying your currency.
No.
Because our
No.
currency is really
I blame-
disabling our ability to buy oil.
I blame the Federal Reserve,
Yeah.
and I blame all the World Bank.
But who allows the Federal Reserve to do what they're doing?
The idiots that passed 1913 and passed the Federal Reserve Act.
But we can abolish the Fed. We can end the Fed.
Well,
we can audit the Fed. Yet our government
everybody
sits
tried to
doing
do that
nothing.
in 1960. Kennedy tried to do that, and they killed him for it.
Well, we need more people willing to do it. We need people who are going to stand up and say, we need to audit the Fed first off, and we need to see what they're doing. We need to see what they're up to. Because, quite honestly, if you look at the value of your dollar since 1913, it's worth literally 5% of what it used to be. What you could buy for $1 back then, you need $23 to buy now. Think about that. If you had money in the bank from your grandparents, it's worth hardly anything now, right? The money that they had, they might have been one of the richest people in the town. That money's hardly worth a thing now because the Federal Reserve has stolen it from you, and your elected officials have allowed it to happen. Okay? They mock the idea of auditing the Fed. Most of the people we send to Congress, they think it's a joke. Okay? They don't want any part of fixing it. And the reason that they don't fix it is because they know the real purpose of the Federal Reserve. Okay? The real purpose of the Federal Reserve from day one, when it was created in 1913 with the Federal Reserve Act, was created by rich bankers and politicians to benefit rich bankers and politicians. Okay? And that's who it benefits today. They said that the goal is to stabilize prices. Have we had stabilized prices? Not if our dollar is worth that little compared to what it used to be, right? We've had steady decline of value. And they said the other thing is full employment. Okay, which is kind of an enigma because they say full employment's always moving, right? So it's kind of hard to define. But the Federal Reserve has consistently fallen short of its two major objectives, stable prices and full employment. But those are not its real objectives. Its real objectives are to protect banks from failure and to maximize profits, of which they are very successful. Yes,
So
ma'am.
this is all sitting in various banks around the nation.
Yep. Well, they're storing it. It's at the 12 district reserve
At
banks.
the reserve, so it's all still in the Federal Reserve. They've
Yes.
printed it. They've done their job.
We think.
They're stockpiling it. Now, what advantage is it to them to stockpile it? I understand if they started releasing that into the system, prices would go crazy.
It's a great question.
But what's their advantage to holding it there? And
Yeah, they don't have an advantage per se, but what they have is a disadvantage for releasing it. If they and see, I think this is a tell-all of the true state of our economy. And the banks know a little bit more about it than we do, don't you think? They're behind the scenes a little bit more. They're afraid to loan that money out, aren't they? If they weren't afraid, why are they sitting on money that could be creating profit? Unless they don't believe it's going to create profit. Unless they believe that that money is still going to default. That there's plenty of people who are still not going to be able to pay that money back. You guys follow me? Does that make sense what I'm saying? So the reason that they're holding it is because they're afraid that loaning that money out will result in a loss, not profit. Mr. Ward.
What's the point of issuing these bonds in the first place to prevent some alleged liquidity crisis?
Mm-hmm.
And they're just sitting on it.
Right. Absolutely. So we still have a liquidity crisis, even though the Fed is trying to do something. Yes,
So
ma'am.
if we were to end the Fed, what would we replace the Federal Reserve note with?
You know, they just asked Thomas Sowell, a very prominent economist, the same question. And I never knew that he was Austrian in his thinking about the Fed. I always thought he was more Milton Friedman. Hey, the Fed's viable, the Fed's good. That's kind of how I perceived Thomas Sowell's thinking. They asked him, if you ended the Fed, what would you do with it? And he said, what do you do when you remove cancer from your body? Do you replace it with something else? That was a pretty good question. But honestly, there are some legitimate functions like processing checks that I don't think you'd have to do away with. But the fact that the powers that the Federal Reserve has, the ability to create money out of thin air, the ability to basically run our system into the ground the way that it is, we need to examine all of those very carefully. And I don't think that happens. I don't think people know enough about the Federal Reserve to just jump on board with ending it. I would be happy with the first step of simply auditing the Fed and looking at what it's doing. And I know they hide stuff, and I know that may not get as far as we want, but at least it'd be a great first step in the right direction. Hand back here too.
What would be the advantage or opportunities of creating all this wealth or printing all this money if you don't do anything with it?
It's a great question. Let me illustrate that. If this is our $800 billion monetary base, and the reason, I don't know, do you guys know supply and demand, okay? Is this fine? The reason that this is a vertical supply curve, because on any given day, the money supply is fixed, right? I mean, they can change it, but it's fixed on that given day. And here is the money demand curve. And at this rate, let's just say if the Fed had just left it at $800 billion, let's say that the interest rate would have been about 3%. I'm just making this number out of thin air. Today's monetary base is 2.7 trillion. So here's money supply, 2.7 trillion. Look at the interest rates. Okay, now, I don't know if you guys have looked at your bank statement lately, but quite honestly, we don't get any money for interest in the bank, right? And why should we? Does the bank need our money in order to do loans anymore? No. When they can borrow money from the Federal Reserve, for a long time, for a couple of years, it was between 0 and 0.25%, which means free. Okay, if they can borrow money for free, why do they care if we even put a dime of savings in the bank? They don't. Okay, and now, quite honestly, too, this is one reason that the stock market's recovered. It has nothing to do with successful business or profit.
Right.
The stock market is recovered because we have nowhere else to go. Where are we going to make money? We're losing purchasing power in the bank.
Right.
At 0.5%, inflation is stealing our wealth every year, right? So people are just rolling the dice and saying, well, I'm losing money anyway. Let's just throw it into mutual funds. And that has caused the market to recover back from its trough. But to answer your question more directly, who benefits from these lower interest rates? Borrowers, right? If you borrow money, you benefit. And who's the biggest borrower of all? Federal government. So the federal government has a lot to gain from low interest rates and a large money supply because it's now easier to pay back the loans that it's taken out. Furthermore, whenever that money starts circulating, the value of the dollar continues to fall even more. It becomes even easier in real dollars to pay that back because they're going to have really large nominal dollars to pay back a relatively smaller debt than they had before.
So are you saying they did all this to keep interest rates low?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, and they want it to keep. They can't just say interest rates are this. they manipulate interest rates through treasury purchases and increasing the money supply. So, and there's a lot of guesswork too. I mean, they can't hit the rate perfectly where they want, but they're pretty good at it, at manipulating the interest rate through purchasing. I think just demanding accountability. I mean, Congress should have the power to regulate, should they not? They should, and we should demand that. We should demand regulation.